Hello, everyone, and welcome to another session from the Learning Technologies Forum this year. I hope you have been enjoying the session so far, but I also hope that you do still have some energy left in you, because the topic that we're discussing in this session is definitely one of the heavy ones in our industry. So the question we're trying to answer is why most workplace training fails to impact organizational performance. And I was just talking to our speakers and I was telling them that if we answer this question, it feels like we are cracking the secret to life and longevity. So it's definitely a hard one. And with us today, talking about this are Philip Allen, host and learning consultant at Innovate Learn, and Adrian Harvey, CEO of Elephants Don't Forget. And what I do hope is that we are not going to forget what we're going to discuss today. Feel free to discuss in the comments and ask questions, because after the presentation, we will have some time to go through your questions and try to answer them as best as possible. So this being said, Philip, Adrian, I invite you to the stage and I wish you good luck.
Thanks, Lavinia. Morning, Philip.
Morning, Adrian.
Fancy Morning, everybody. So for those of you who have participated in Elephants Don't Forget webinars in the past, you'll notice this is a slight deviation from our normal format, but we're going to do our best. This is the first time we've run a format like this, so we, as experienced professionals, Philip, we will do our best to run through this in a way that gets you as much value as you can. I think before we start, Philip and I were talking about this. Lavinia made the point that this is a heavyweight subject matter. I think it's important to note that challenge is a good thing. I am a lifelong learner. I'm not a learning and development professional, Philip is. Challenge is a good thing. It's a necessary thing. And one of the reasons that we're doing this presentation now is because we both feel really strongly about workplace training. We feel really strongly that perhaps, there's no perhaps, it's not working at the level that Philip and I would like it to work at. And that can be fixed. It needs to be fixed for the benefit of the UK economy as a whole and our global competitiveness and the effectiveness and competitiveness of your own businesses. So we're going to go into that. So don't shoot the messenger. Obviously, I'm available on LinkedIn. So if you want to send hate mail afterwards or any other comment, feel free to do so. I've got thick skin. But let's do this from the context that we're L&D friends and we want L&D to prosper. And the purpose of this presentation is to help you do so. Is that fair, Philip?
100%. And we also are coming from allies and advocates' point of view, but also I'm coming from a practitioner's point of view. So having earned the hard yards, not only in financial services, but specifically in wealth management as a current and practicing senior head of learning and development. So I'm going through these lessons as we speak. So this is also, I'm learning from you and Adrian's learning from yourselves, as well as we're imparting our knowledge and wisdom there. And if you think we're full of it, then please do so in the chat. That's great. And we'll try and actually address some of those challenges together, because I think that supporting us as a sector and as an industry is super important there. Let's crack on with our first question. And you know what? You like throwing grenades and cricket balls, Adrian. So our first poll question, if we can, Ben, that'd be great if you could pop that up on to the deck for us to complete. So the first poll question is, do your C-suite leaders believe L&D can materially contribute to the profit growth of your business?
Key point, not you, do your C-suite leaders, yeah? So as I say to my kids when they were doing their exams, read the question. Yeah, this is the insight that we want is this perspective from you, please.
Okay. And thanks, Jessica. Appreciate that. Adrian, what? Is that correct?
Oh, listen, I think here's one of these things, right? So we host an event like this, and there is an inherent natural bias for people who resonate with the title. Yeah. So if you're comfy and, dare I say, lazy with the status quo, you're not going to attend this session. So I think we've probably got a lot of challengers. Well, that's interesting. Hold on, it's changing. 58% yes. Wow. That's really interesting. 81% no, I thought was probably more reflective of where we are. It's changed. I don't know what the sensitivity is or how many people have voted on that, which makes a difference. I can't see that on the screen.
Yeah. Is that the final, Jessica, is that the final answer? And we closed that on that poll. So I think we need to, okay.
This will be interesting.
All right. 56%. So 56% of you as an audience believe your C-suite leaders believe that your roles, your job, your function is making a material contribution to the profit growth of your business. And 44% obviously saying no. Adrian, thoughts?
I'm surprised.
Well, put it this way.
I think you've got.
If you're not generating profit, then you're a cost center. And if you're a cost center, then all's up for grabs. I've learned this the hard way, and if you're a cost center, then you're going to be reviewed and assessed and scrutinized through that lens. You talked about your C-suite experience, Adrian. You've run some pretty big companies in the past. Costs, are acceptable, but being a cost center,
Yes, well, a very wise old gentleman told me once that the trouble with cost centers, they have a habit at review time of being in the spotlight, and that has a nasty habit of turning into a searchlight. And traditionally, bullets follow searchlights. So he was trying to compel me at the time to change my perspective as a cost center and be more contributive to the bottom line. And I think it resonates with this group. And hopefully what we're going to talk to you about will make some sense for that comment.
And so when we look at the significance, the value and the impact of L&D, many of you have probably looked at this before, but I'll post this also in the chat so you can have a LinkedIn connection with this, put in the comments and in the private chat there. But if you were looking at this with clear vision and clear transparency here, you'll actually recognize that actually as a voice in front of the C-suite, is in front of the executive table, that the increase and the significance and the influence of L&D has increased over the last 2 years. But contrast that with the last bullet point, Adrian, on the left-hand side that we've addressed, that only 12% of L&D professionals strongly agree that their organization measures the impact of training. There's a disconnect between the two. More people at the top table.
There's a massive disconnect, right? And interestingly, the data point from the LinkedIn survey is really close to the data point that we just got off this survey here.
Good shout.
Yeah, which is very interesting. And I think the point, really, the first bullet, L&D practitioners passionately believe that learning is mission critical to enterprise success. I do not believe that the C-suite agrees with you. And one of the data points I would offer up is that, according to the Brandon Hall report, only 12% of the L&D practitioners strongly agree that their organization measures the impact of training. So if only 12%, it could be that everyone on the call, or at least half the people on the call, are in that 12%. That's that bias point I made earlier, possibly. But if you're not even measuring the impact of the training, you've got no chance of being anything other than a cost center.
And that's the challenge, I think, that I certainly found myself in the past. And to an extent, I talked about this offline, about my meeting with the CEO just recently. And so we all find that struggle, and we all have to evidence our value as a profit center as well. Perception sometimes, though, is not reality. And when we actually see the decline in training spend in the UK, these figures have been, you can see that these are from the New Economic Foundation there, as well as the Work Institute there. But there's a drop in training. There's still a significant proportion of our audience recognizing that they're potentially considered as a cost center, Adrian, hasn't painted a very good picture.
It doesn't. And I think the factual data, if you look at this, to what extent is learning and development represented at the top table, at the C-suite? So when I ask this question, I don't mean represented through a head of people or head of HR. I mean, has a role learning and development director who sits on the main board? I've actually never met that person. I meet hundreds of L&D practitioners a year from firms big and small. I have come across a very small number of firms who have this role, but almost exclusively they are themselves involved in learning. So the challenge that we face in the UK today, not only is spending falling dramatically, but if the C-suite values IT massively more than they value learning and development. If the C-suite in your business valued learning and development in the same way that they valued information technology, there would be a learning and development director sat round that table. There isn't. And the spend is falling. And the UK is like the poor boy of Europe. So I think I want to paint a fairly gloomy picture. The facts support that picture. We're not in a great place, and it needs to change. The reason we're not in a great place, in our opinion, is, as Lavinia said right at the beginning, we're not connecting the brilliant efforts and hard work of learning and development practitioners to the bottom line. So we're going to come on and talk about that in a little bit more. So the backdrop is spend is falling, and the facts say that L&D does not have a place round the top table.
And I think it starts certainly with ourselves as individual L&D practitioners, Adrian, and we need to refrain from speaking L&Dism and actually start speaking the data and the language of the C-suite. Now, we all think we do that. That doesn't mean to say you have to get an MBA at Harvard. It does mean to say that you need to change that. How do we do that?
That's the question to me. How you do that is, we've taken I see quite a lot of stuff, actually, self-critical stuff for the sector, outing these aren't our words. Vanity metrics. I saw another publication use the phrase vanity metrics. The terminology that I see by its absence is, if that's not ridiculous, that's missing from most, if not all, learning and development lexicon is profit. Profit, growth, efficiency, productivity. I've run some big businesses, and these are the words that are used around that table. There are a bunch of other words that relate to those words, but they're the words that drive the conversation. Even in charities. And Philip and I were talking about that brilliant brand Patagonia, weren't we? Yeah, and how, irrespective of feelings, that's a brilliant business. They have to make a profit. Profit is not a bad thing. It is an essential, critical component of every business. And people might say, "Well, that's bloody obvious," right? Okay, So the words, the lexicon of the boardroom is profit, growth, efficiency, and productivity, not training hours delivered.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
And sometimes, when I speak to some of our customers, say, "Well, it's really difficult." I accept that. I don't think in the current environment it's particularly easy. Yeah, and I think it's got much more difficult for L&D practitioners to link the effort and hard work that they're doing to the bottom line.
And I think that if you can't focus on growing revenue, if you don't believe that you can align your learning objectives and learning outcomes to that, and if you can't ally that to lowering costs, you can certainly ally that to lowering risk, the risk profile of your firm and your business. And I think it's key that you look and deliver your training programs, your training offerings, or your L&D offerings through those three lenses. Actually generating revenue, lowering costs, and actually addressing risks, key risks to your business is well there. When you speak to L&D professionals or even C-suite, and you've got the vanity metrics on the right hand side in that table there, are many folk in the L&D community talking business metrics that you're discussing? Are they talking about those highlighted in blue on the screen?
Okay, let's go back to my first point about bias. So in a nicest possible way, I only really find myself talking to L&D practitioners, generally speaking, who are pushing for change. Yeah. The ones who are happy in my word, lazy, Gen X, sorry, I probably shouldn't apologize for that. Yeah, but the more lazy, stuck in their ways, I'm not speaking with those people, so I don't particularly know their views. I speak to a lot of L&D practitioners who are frustrated. Yeah, perhaps more frustrated, probably too weak a word. Yeah, that they're annoyed, angry. Yeah, that the work that they do isn't being recognised, and that perhaps they don't have the airtime that they need. Their voice isn't heard. They're pushed into a corner. Their budgets are cut, and they're not part of the solution. They're part of the problem, despite a genuine, authentic desire to be part of the solution. Someone's asked, can you give me some examples of how to measure the impact of training? Yes, we will absolutely do so. That's part of the plan today.
And Edwin, good shout. Do you believe that there's variations between industry to industry? I work in FS primarily. Adrian, you oversee telco, energy, and FS. Do you see maturity, different maturity and different approach to L&D in different sectors?
Yeah, one of the things, it's a good question, Edwin, well done. I think I often, if you've listened to our webinars in the past, you will know that I reference health check, safety, health, environment and quality, health and safety in the workplace. And this has come on leaps and bounds in the UK over the last 2 decades, right? It's really genuinely changed people's lives. So does it differ by sector? Yes, it does differ by sector. And I think it differs by subject matter within, intra-sector. Yeah. So I think when you talk about health and safety, I think firms perhaps take this far more seriously now than they would have done in the past, and certainly far more seriously than other subject matters that might fall into the broader learning curriculum for that firm.
Good shout. So we're talking about challenges, we're talking about opportunities. I don't think there's anything greater as a challenge or stroke an opportunity than this small thing called AI. And so our second poll question is, do you see AI as a threat to L&D employment? Do you see AI as a threat to L&D employment? Smash a yes. 1, 2, no. There. What metrics do you reckon are going to keep me in a job, Adrian? Whilst they cogitate over the answers.
I'm a business person, right? I'm a capitalist. I'm a big believer in word company. It's becoming an old-fashioned word, actually, and firms have dropped it. A lot of organisations have dropped it. A company is a group of people. And if you use that in the context of business, it is a group of people under a brand delivering a product or service. Quite often, the quality of that company is what determines the commercial success of that organisation. So, whilst ironically, I run a leading artificial intelligence business, interestingly, we chose to have AI that supported people rather than displaced people. So I see people, employees, being the differentiator between great, good, and crap. Even in a world of iRobot. Yeah. So whilst you've got employees, the company, the better quality, the more competent that company, the more effective that organisation. And I'd be real surprised if we got many dissenters on the presentation today, on the webinar today, who would not agree with that, because perhaps you're in the wrong role.
Yeah, well, the final results have come in. Scores on the board are 26% says yes, you see, they do see it as a threat, but 74% say no. Well, I'm in the yes camp. Where are you?
Do you see artificial intelligence as a threat to L&D employment? Yes. Massively. We'll come on to talk about that.
Okay, we're going to hold that thought. We're going to hold you to that because we want to know what your thoughts are on that. So it's not going to shift the dial, though. And the reason why training is not going to work is because we've talked about this in a couple of slides previously, is that we're stuck in this matrix, Adrian. We're stuck in this matrix of actually, we're talking about training. And again, if we're educating the C-suite and execs, why are we using the word training there?
I agree. We're aiming at the wrong target, right? Training is one component of the end game. Yeah, in my opinion. And I think the learning and development have been the victim of cutting costs, dare I say accountants, so if there's any accountants on the call, apologies. Yeah, taking the opportunity to cut costs, cut the amount of investment in time and money in training. What happens then is firms end up race to the bottom, do it, we'll discuss what it is, yeah, do it as cheaply and quickly as possible. If you compare workplace training in the majority of firms, probably on this call, with, for example, how the military approach training, how trades, electricians, plumbers, roofers, carpenters, and how perhaps professional services like accountants, dare I say, approach training, it couldn't be any more different. It could not be any more different. In the examples I gave you, it is a lifelong commitment to continual development, continual assessment, and an increasing in skills and competence. You don't find somebody in an electrical firm saying, well, we better not send Darkwing on that course because he might get better. It's we need every one of our employees to be as absolutely capable and competent as possible. And the whole organization will be focused around output. And given that it's generally super resource heavy, the output is delivered by people. Technology will play its part, but far less so. The investment in people is just the whole approach is completely different.
Exactly. And we're not going to shift the dial if only 12% of learners are actually applying what they've actually absorbed from training courses. And, that's not our stats. I've just posted in the chat, thanks, Jessica, what Harvard said. That's backed up by a survey by McKinsey, small organizations, I know, that would actually evidence to say, look, we're not landing the blows that gets us that door wider and wider open to the C-suite here if we're still actually not evidencing ROI?
I think I need to add something. So I think this is one way that perhaps we can articulate what we're talking about more easily. So the training that we see is often very good. This is not a criticism of training. Yeah. The problem is we've been forced to aim for the wrong target. So the delivery of training, I think, gets done very well. The trouble is the delivery of training does not correlate to the improvement in the economic outturn of the enterprise. And that's the problem.
Yeah, you've nailed it there. Yeah, that's it.
And I will say for that, please don't be offended by the last bullet point, Philip. I think we both work extensively in the financial services sector where the phrase box ticking or tick box training is a phrase. So if you're outside the financial services looking at that saying that's really offensive, it is a phrase that is fully accepted in the financial services space because unfortunately in a lot of firms in that sector they have ended up in that environment. This is good. I think, Philip, we can do this as a tag team. So I think what employers want, as an employer, I'm an employer in my own business now, and I've employed tens of thousands of people in large FTSE-owned businesses in the past. So what do employers want? I tell my staff off for telling me what people don't want. They don't want knowledge champions. It's not pub quiz. I can't think of any of my colleagues around the exec saying, what we need is more knowledgeable people. They don't say that. What they say is we need more competent people.
Yeah.
And people need to be more competent, capable, and effective. They need to be more efficient. These are the words that the C-suite are using in relation to the employees. Knowledge.
But Adrian, 10,000 people completed my course.
That's absolutely marvelous, and that is well done. And knowledge, which is probably what your course trained, is a critical component of the outcome as a C-suite, as a CEO that I am looking for. It is a component of. It is not the end game. Competence is the end game. So what I, as a CEO, want, I would like you, L&D, Philip, to make these people who are, for example, my customer service function, of which I have 1,000, I would like you to make them more competent, more effective, more efficient, so we make more profit. To which you will say, I can train them. The challenge is training in and of itself is not sufficient to move the dial. That training needs to be translated into competence, and that competence needs to be applied in the workforce.
And for all those detractors who don't think that's possible, this is a training manager from Moneybarn, a client, full disclosure, a client of Nelly there, who have actually taken that process that Adrian's walked you through and looked at on the left-hand side of this table. Yeah, they could just demonstrate and they could output that we've trained people and they've answered 15,000 critical knowledge interventions or questions, but they didn't stay there. They didn't stay at just okay. They didn't move to just to good, well, saying they reduced refresher training by 50%. Even though they got the metrics there. That wasn't good enough for this training manager. They went on to better, where they said, well, actually, we want to shift the dial on a strategic objective of the firm, decreed by the board, not by her, by the board. It was a business outcome that they wanted to up customer outcomes. Remember, this is a financial services sector, so the parlance of our industry is that good customer outcomes is a deliverable for all 60,000 FCA regulated firms. But we also wanted improved handling time and also a reducing in average wait times there. But that wasn't good enough there. They moved on to the far right hand side which is delivering best, a 300% return. Now, you can say that with a lot of pride, that your training interventions, your knowledge interventions, call it what you like, delivered from something that was completion hours, knowledge understood, right through to an ROI to the right hand side. And this isn't just for organizations like Moneybarn, Adrian. This is a cut and keep template that all of us can use.
Yeah. I think there's some golden rules to this. And in the Moneybarn example, one of the reasons we're able to share this with you is it's been signed off. So we've got approval to share this data in relation to the Moneybarn brand. This is because people independent of learning and development have validated these numbers. And that is one of the keys to success. So I'm looking back. I think it might have been Elsa who was asking the question about how do you do this. One of the ways that you do this is that you bring in other parties, who will audit and validate your claims. Not that they don't believe you, but I've always had this phrase, marking your own homework. Yeah. If you look at how boards work and how businesses work, there's lots of cross validation. Yeah. You should not run away from this.
And so you're right, Adrian, because we were on a webinar with Frederick Reichard, the founder of MPS, and he said the same thing. He basically said, look, unless you actually do it externally, it's null and void, MPS. And that's what you need.
So this is where I get excited, right? What a surprise. Philip's the L&D practitioner. I'm the business person. And what I want from Philip and the L&D community is results. Results for all of the hard work. Don't get me wrong. I'm not criticizing the hard work and effort, enthusiasm, commitment, imagination that goes into the L&D community. What I am criticizing, which is a perfectly legitimate word, by the way, what I am criticizing is the impact that has on the bottom line, because mostly it misses completely. In these examples, this is what I'm talking about. So from a C-suite perspective, these results, you may, apologies if I'm teaching you suck eggs, first contact resolution. This is a golden, and this is not a small brand, right? This is a golden metric. I phone up Microsoft. Microsoft's number one objective for dealing with consumers is that when you phone Microsoft, they fix your problem first go. So you don't have to phone back. We don't have to retype, or re-engage, to use their terminology. First contact resolution improvement by 9%. That's worth millions of dollars to that brand. If you're in a boardroom at Microsoft and you're talking about training hours delivered, well, you won't even get in the boardroom. If you're there talking about a first contact resolution improvement of 9% over a relatively short period of time, people are asking, well, how did you do that? Can we have some more? What was involved? They're engaged because this means huge amounts of money. AHT, average handle time. Some people say it's a bit of a dinosaur metric. It's an important metric. How much of my time as a consumer am I spending on my problem with you? It's down 12.5%. Another way of looking at this is per 1,000 people that they employ. That's 12,500. Sorry, that's 125 people less required to do that same amount of work. Does that mean they make people redundant? No, not at all. Quite the opposite. It means that they can free up those people to do other more value enhancing stuff for their customers. So we move on to LV. I'm sure a lot of you know this brand. These are metrics that are validated by parties outside of L&D in these businesses. Complaint reduction down by 62.5%. I don't need to explain that. Call wait times down 85%. Speed to competence, which is a really interesting metric. A lot of firms don't really measure it. They measure the time it takes to get a new recruit onto the phones, for example. We measure competence as a numerical score. So you need to hit 80% in this job family. Here's what competence means using your own definitions, and we translate that to a number. Yeah, speed to competence, improvement by 30%. This means these people, these employees, are productive 30% quicker. It also means, from a personal perspective, that employee feels way better, faster, the attrition's lower. I know that I'm not contributing to this business. Everyone does. The sooner that I can feel that I'm part of the company and I'm pulling my weight, the better. The longer that goes on, the more likely I am to leave. This is what we're seeing in the financial services sector. So one of the massive wins is around well-being and helping that individual know that they are part of the answer, and helping that individual see the results of their personal activities. At New Day, there's some great ones here. Again, there's a theme. Call hold time down, 35%. After call work, I think maybe you may or may not know this. A lot of contact centers, once you get off the phone with the individual, the agent's still keying into the system. Yeah, dead time. Yeah, better that was done on the call, or better still, there was a less requirement to do so. Nearly 30%. QA improvement +7. To get that in perspective, you would need to understand their QA system. I can tell you that's a brilliant improvement.
There's some really punchy stats here, and I think these get the board very excited, and they become advocates. So instead of you showing you the door or the exit, at least you're actually getting some face time and some air time with those senior managers here. Good question. I want to throw back to you, Adrian, from Edwin, which is the real challenge is getting this level of improvement is very difficult. Is the challenge how close businesses can get to this level? I think they're referring to the money barn example, especially if you're a small to medium-sized business. Yeah.
SME means different things. You know, it depends what's your measure of SME. Is it turnover? Is it people? I think when you're down at there's a double-edged sword, isn't there? You know, if you're down at if you're in an organisation with 20 people, theoretically, you're at a sort of trades level where you could, if you so chose, adopt a continual training culture relatively easily. Once you get sort of 100 odd people, which is our sort of definition of SME, that's impossible, and you need technology. So is this hard to do? It's harder than not doing it. Is it hard per se? No. If you use the right technology, and we were talking about with Lavinia right at the beginning, but actually before we got on this call, what's the big change? The big change is mindset.
Correct.
So if your mindset is L&D is part of the answer, not part of the problem, and I am going to put my head above the parapet, and I'm going to engage with the business, and I'm going to ask them what operational challenges they've got that relate to their people. And I'm going to put in place training that is measured independently of L&D of the impact that has on those outcomes. To do that, you need to measure competence at the start, ongoing, and continually. Competence, not short-term memory test at the end of a training intervention.
I've put some questions in the chat, which Jessica, I think will be able to share with you. Actually, questions I ask myself as a practitioner to actually make sure that I course correct, because sometimes we get super excited about very different initiatives and understanding about where we need to be going. And sometimes we can't see the wood from the trees. I think that these questions that we've posted are ones where you can make sure that you're accountable to the objectives of the business. Now, if you want to go one stage further, you can even draw down your company goals and objectives, which should be on your company website, I hope, and actually work back from there. Or guess what? You can actually knock on the door after the exec meeting, the annual board meeting, or alternatively the quarterly board meeting, and say, what did you discuss there? How can I work back from there? I don't think that's an unreasonable request to make, because at least they know that you are trying to speak or understand exactly the specifics. And I would go direct to the C-suite. I would sideswipe, dare I say it, HR, and go direct to the people who are actually setting the strategic objectives of the business, so that you've heard it from the horse's mouth, to ensure that we don't get this. And I think that the lexicon of the language is critical in this point, Adrian.
Yeah. So let's go back to the first point. Quite often, the training is excellent. The training is excellent. It's rare that we see training where we go, wow, who did that? Yeah. Now all the technology's there, all the skills are there. It's really straightforward. So the quality of the training is great. What goes wrong is people forget. People forget an enormous amount, 60% in 24 hours. Yeah. People also mislearn. So your training might have said 7 and 3 is 10, but Adrian sort of looked at it and thought, I think that's 11. And that's what he learns. And with respect, most firms have no idea that he's mislearned that. Most firms have got absolutely no idea or capability to assess what has been forgotten after the training intervention. And by the way, absolute base level common sense. No employee can put into practice training, no matter how good it is, that they failed to learn or have mislearned. It's obvious, isn't it? Yeah. The trouble is, operations, in my experience, having run some very big operations, quite cynical of L&D, and L&D are time hoovers. And what I don't need is my people taken off the coalface, from the call center, whatever it is that you do, to do more training. So I'm really protective of that, what we call a C-suite level productive time. So every training course that I go on reduces my productive time, which immediately impacts my profitability on the potential that it will improve the capability of the individual, which I don't see, so I'm reluctant to release the people. So learning has to be continual. You can't, one and done doesn't work. If it did, we wouldn't send our kids to school. We'll just give them here's that course called life. Take that, learn it, take the test at the end, and get out there, start working. Rest of the time, for the other previous 18 years, you can just play. That obviously doesn't work. It is a continual thing. So competence is built on many, many learnings, that are refined and developed into ultimately a competence relating to in this case, job function. I think and know it's cultural. Some firms I love this quote. It's something like, why would we train our people? They will just then leave.
Yeah.
And the counter is, if we don't train them, they'll stay. Yeah. So it's like, oh my God. So if your culture is right, you've got nothing to worry about training people and then them going off and getting a job somewhere else. Your culture that's a fundamental issue outside of L&D's remit, to be honest. What's missing? C-suite valuing it. So as it stands, they don't, or you would be sat round the table. You're not. I think the faster that you can take hard data, like we improved first contact resolution by 9% to a C-suite, the more they will value it, the more they will listen, the more they will ask, can you help, please? Yeah, rather than perhaps you trying to force yourself into that conversation. So you do need to prove it. That's life, right? So I'm not just going to take your word for it. And in fact, based on taking your word for it, you're not round the table, and I don't believe you, and I don't value it. So you've got to change that paradigm. And you can start small. You don't need to change the whole business. You can start small and build on your successes, just like learning. Just build on your successes. Yes. So training alone will never move the dial. And we'll come back to this. We've got a little bit of time. We've got 15 minutes for questions, Philip. I'm surprised I haven't seen. I haven't quite seen the telling off yet. We probably need to come back to that. So training alone is not going to move the dial. If you're in a space that says training alone, and should we just cover that point about L&D not being under threat from AI?
Yes.
If what you're doing is training, I think Philip and I could do that with some technology and no L&D people. So if what you're doing is just training, I would be concerned, because there's technology out there right now. And by the way, AI is such a buzzword, that is getting C-suite attention. So whether or not it's proven or not, you might be in the uncomfortable position of someone saying, well, look, what we do at the moment doesn't really move the dial, so we're going to be in no worse a situation. We'll try the AI.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's harsh.
I can create a knowledge hub from ChatGPT. So if anybody's got a question, maybe I'll just create a learning library, an internal learning academy through ChatGPT. Because the C-suite's kids at school are learning to use this and using the technology, so they're going to bring it back to the workplace and say, hey, why don't we do this? This online platform. So we have to be really careful here. But I think this is the opportunity, and this is how I'm turning around in the firm that I work with. We're actually saying, this is actually making me more strategic, AI. I'm actually saying, well, look, I've got this opportunity. I don't have to write learning aims and outcomes and objectives for courses. I can be supported. I can oversee that through the use of AI. But what I can be is more consultative to the business lines and to the strategic direction of the organization. That's fantastic. It's released such a lot of time, making me more profitable to the organization because I'm focusing on business objectives and outcomes there. So I say, bring it on.
I think, so the thing that you said, Philip, was a cut out and keep template, the 4 phases. I think if you're honest, private moment, look in the mirror and look at those 4 phases. The more that you can move, the more that you can move to the right, the less likely you are to be outsourced by a piece of AI. You're just okay. I mean it. Yeah. So you correlate to outcomes. The AI is not doing that. It's just not doing that. And it's not able to because it's people we're talking about. Yeah. So if you can get yourself in that place, you're adding value. You're moving the bottom line and you're being listened to. Down here, probably going the other way, whichever way that looks like on the thing. So down at just okay, I think you're under threat.
Yeah.
Time will tell.
And I think that there is an opportunity here for you to lead the decision making with AI and learning together. The C-suite sees AI on one hand and also learning on the other. You have a responsibility to join the two together to create that powerhouse. That is the value added that you bring to the organization. Talk us through how organizations...
No, because when we do these things, Philip, we always say, when we do our own webinars, we say, we promise this is not going to be a sales webinar. Yeah, because I've been on these things and you get some bald bloke sit in front of you, talk for an hour about his boring product. So we don't do that. Suffice to say, we add a new customer to our herd every week. We're growing at about 50% a year. Yeah, we are leaders in our space. We trade in 40 odd countries and Microsoft's our biggest customer. What we're doing works. If you want to know more about it, contact us, please. Yeah, I don't really want to do the question and answers thing with people because I think that will get more value from the attendees.
Good shout on that.
They can read, Philip.
Yeah, that's true. Question from Deb. Are you able to share more about how to measure competency and how it's measured objectively? Yes,
that's dead simple in our world. Probably very difficult in your world right now, if not impossible. What we do is we start with what's the training that you give. And by the way, I use the employee name Tarquin because I don't know anyone called Tarquin, and sometimes I'm quite derogatory about Tarquin. So apologies if there's a Tarquin on the call. What we do is we say, what role does Tarquin do in your organization? If we were to join your organization tomorrow in that role, where's the training related to that role? Oh, here it all is. Where's the policies, procedures? Here it all is. And are there other people doing this role? Yeah, loads of them. Excellent. Are any of those people that are doing that role hitting their key performance indicator metrics or their scorecard? Are they? Yes. Excellent. That proves it's possible. We take all that. That's an important point. Got to be possible. Yeah, so someone's got to be able to do it today, ideally more than one. We take that content, we strip it for questions. We have authors that do this for a living. Those questions vary in degrees of sophistication. If I take it to the most sophisticated question, those questions would be questions that assess judgment. And actually, most of what most of our customers do, their people, the difference between good, great, and crap is a judgment by an employee at an interaction with a customer. An employee makes a judgment based on their competence, capability, training, etc. So judgment is fundamental. So we have questions that assess judgment. I can tell you what they look like. All four are the right answer. So we ask someone a question. Philip, in this scenario that's unique to your business, what's the optimal response to this customer question or situation? One answer, all are right, all are correct. One's optimal, two are neutral, one's suboptimal. The more Philip answers suboptimally for those types of questions, the more insight the AI can get from where he's going wrong. And the more we can then close loop, because it's a continual process, the more Nelly, as we call her, can fix it. Go on, more questions. I'm just conscious we've got 9 minutes. I want to get as many done as we can.
How did Moneybarn determine what skills were required to achieve the best level? And do they have?
Yeah, that's cool. They did that first bit, and the second bit that they do and did on an ongoing basis. They look at their Olympians, their top performers, and they see what they are doing. What are they actually doing? And we clone it. Put it back into the AI. Continue. And by the way, it's not a race. I happen to be dyslexic, right? So I learn at a different speed. My business partner would say I just don't learn, but that's another matter. I do learn. I just have difficulties learning in some of the traditional ways. So it's not a race. The fact that Philip gets there before me, it's irrelevant. It just needs to be continual, gentle, supportive, private, and I will get there. As will Philip, as will all of your employees. So it's two-phase answer. One is your core theory, let's call it. Nelly guarantees that they learn that. The next thing she does is she guarantees that we translate that into actual in-role competence. And the next thing we can do, in Moneybarn's case, for example, who are a sophisticated user of our technology, they can clone the behaviors of their best people and put it into the AI. And then you get turbocharged results.
Here's a question for you, Adrian. Do you know whether the performance management system of these firms, I think he's referencing the firms that we've name-checked in the discussion, align with the company's results?
Well, if they don't know the wrong bloody systems, right? So generally speaking, I can talk from running a very big business. I can't talk specifically in relation to our customers, but if you just talk in general terms, a board will determine a budget for the next year. They will then break that down by function, and those functions will then have key performance indicators that relate to that budget in order to deliver those outcomes. If they set the wrong key performance indicators, they're going to fail to achieve their objective. What I do see is bad behaviors, Philip, which is a subject matter that vexes us quite a lot in the financial services space, where remuneration programs perhaps drive poor outcomes. In other words, Philip, I'm going to pay you double commission if you do this that disadvantages the customer, Mr. Harvey. Now, the regulator wants to stamp that out, and that's a all-round poor outcome. So if you're talking in those sorts of terms, I know that occurs in all sorts of businesses. But ultimately, the business, and I would encourage L&D to get under the skin of that, work with an operational leader and say, what are your key performance indicators? What are you using? What are the levers and buttons, in my parlance, that you use to drive the performance of your part of the business? They will be on a scorecard or a report, key performance indicators. And that report will be what, Philip? Red, amber, green. RAG, yeah, as we call it. So that'd be a RAG status, and there'll be a variance per KPI at a macro level. And then if you've got a quite sophisticated organization, they might even measure that down to team or even individual. In that case, we can move the dial with you really quickly.
I've always thought that the best question was, how do I help you hit your bonus to a director and to a senior manager? And they quickly bought you a coffee or actually put their arm around your shoulder, because now you're actually talking, right, well, actually, these are the metrics that I align to and I need to adhere to there. Question from Akushia. We'd love to know more about the first steps to transitioning away from just training to strategically partnering with the business at C-suite level to increase profit, growth, and efficiency. There.
My advice would be you must know someone in an operational role, a senior operational role, that you get on with, that you can go and have a coffee chat with and say, Philip, I would like to make more of a difference in this business. And to do that, I would like to help you hit your targets or beat your targets. Can I work with you to do that? The first thing you need is a willing buyer. Philip says no, you want a bit of a sticky wicket. Assuming Philip says yes, then I think the things that are going through Philip's head is probably looking back at the past and saying, you're going to hoover up my people's time. You're going to cost a load of money and I ain't going to get anything to show for it. So my suggestion would be you go into that conversation, whether or not you believe that to be true or not. Perception is reality. I assure you, Philip is sat there thinking, you're going to hoover up my time, it's going to cost me money, you're not going to deliver bottom line results. So what my suggestion would be you go into that conversation with Philip's mindset in mind, not yours. And then have some conversation about, if I could move one thing in. So we ask, when we, okay, inside track. So when we meet an organization for the first time, we meet a COO, one this week, the question that our fantastic BD asked Sam, so if you could change one thing in relation to your people, what would it be? They make mistakes. Go on then. Yeah, they make lots of mistakes. They're brilliant, but they make mistakes. How expensive are those mistakes? Yeah, suffice to say, Sam, they cost us a lot of money. Okay, what if we could help you eradicate those mistakes? Well, how are you going to do that? I'll come on to that, but if we could, would it be worthwhile of your time to have a little look at that? Yes, it would. Ding dong. You've got your first discussion point. It may not be the right one, but you now have something to coalesce around to solve. You have a problem statement from your stakeholder. Do this, and I will be your friend, because this is worth a load of money to me. It makes me look good. It helps me get my bonus in Philip's parlance.
Yeah.
2 minutes, Philip.
I think it's time to wrap up.
Go into wrap up, Jessica said. No other question. Get off the phone.
I'm back in the army. I've been told what to do.
Didn't type that. That's throwing her under the bus. No, she didn't say that.
All right, we're joined by Lavinia. Okay, right, there you go. This is clockwork. This is
your sign.
This is it. I think
what we're doing now is say thank you very much, and all of this is available. So the recording's available, isn't it, Lavinia?
Yes, they are. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing everything. I would just summarize for the last question that was asked, that we need to ask better questions. I think from everything that I've heard you say, Adrian, that was the main point. Just ask better questions. So thank you so much. It was a wealth of knowledge in an hour.
Not part of the solution. L&D are part of the solution, and that means a mindset shift for L&D. You do that, you're going to win. As long as you're part of the problem. There's some technology coming down this pipe, I think, that's going to change your world.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me know that we've got a job next year, Adrian.
Well, you already have. You've got it. You get it.
Okay, thank you so much, Adrian, Philip, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Please stick around because there's another great session coming. If you're interested in accelerating skills development and performance with AI coaching, because we were just talking about AI, this session is coming right up. Thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing you again. Bye.